The woman was the private doctor of a famous painter, and also his mistress. She took care of everything for him and helped him keep all of his secrets. But one day, a girl suddenly appeared claiming to be his biological daughter. Filled with hatred, the woman decided to kill this so-called daughter of unknown origin. But that night, her body was found floating in the pond on the estate. And when the truth was finally revealed, the ugliest side of human nature was laid completely bare. One day, the famous painter Gozo received a theft notice from someone using the alias Gentleman Thief. The message clearly stated that the thief would soon steal one of Gozo's treasured paintings. Inspector Isamu knew that Gentleman Thief was an elusive criminal who had never failed. He believed this case would be far more complicated than a simple art theft. So he personally asked the young detective Hajime to accompany him to Gozo's luxurious estate and assist with the investigation. As soon as Hajime arrived at the estate, he unexpectedly ran into Sakura, a younger schoolmate who had recently transferred away. Sakura had a gentle appearance and a quiet, reserved personality. A month earlier, she had been bullied by several girls. Hajime stepped in and rescued her. She quietly developed feelings for him because of that. She had originally planned to confess those feelings to Hajime, but Miyuki suddenly appeared, forcing Sakura to leave before she could say what was in her heart. Soon afterward, Gozo publicly announced that he had reunited with his long-lost daughter. He introduced Sakura as his biological child. There were two key pieces of evidence supporting the claim. The first was Gozo's famous painting, My Beloved Daughter. The young girl in the painting looked exactly like Sakura. The second was a birthmark on Sakura's body that perfectly matched the one depicted in the portrait. However, every guest at the estate secretly had doubts. They all believed Sakura had fabricated her identity to inherit Gozo's fortune and reputation. Everyone gathered inside the luxurious estate, whether guest or staff member, had their own hidden motives and a possible reason to steal the painting. The primary suspects included the Dr. Kaizu, the painter Kenjiro, the art dealer Seiji, Gozo's nephew Haruhiko, the magazine reporter Maki, and the butler Kamiyama. It seemed that everyone in the mansion was hiding selfish intentions. The only innocent soul was a little dog named Poirot. Poirot instinctively hated the smell of lavender. Whenever someone carried the scent of lavender, the dog would bark non-stop. Hajime also learned about two unusual habits of Gozo. First, Gozo had an intense fear of public transportation. He never traveled by ship or airplane. Instead, he always relied on his private luxury car. Second, Gozo constantly claimed that he was a master of completely original paintings. He insisted that he never painted from imagination. Every person, every landscape, and every scene in his works had been something he had personally witnessed in real life. Gozo lived in a luxurious estate. Across the river stood Lavender Villa, where all of his priceless paintings were stored. Walking between the two properties took about 10 minutes, while driving there took only a few moments. Lavender Villa was surrounded by endless fields of lavender. Before long, the first art theft quietly took place. Gozo's self-portrait mysteriously disappeared from Lavender Villa. The local police quickly arrived and began a thorough investigation, but Hajime didn't waste his time examining the crime scene. Simply by noticing Poirot's unusual barking, he immediately identified the painting thief. The culprit was Gozo's nephew Haruhiko. The front entrance of Lavender Villa was heavily guarded. However, the backyard had almost no security at all. Haruhiko sneaked into the gallery through the backyard and stole the self-portrait. On his way in and out, he crossed the lavender fields. The strong scent of lavender clung to his clothes. Poirot's keen sense of smell exposed him immediately. After being confronted, Haruhiko confessed. He claimed that he had buried the painting. The police then went to the location Haruhiko described and began digging, but they found absolutely nothing. Then something truly bizarre happened. The stolen painting suddenly reappeared hanging back in its original place. It also had a taunting message from Gentleman Thief written on it. Gentleman Thief declared that next time, the painting would definitely be stolen for good. The following day, everyone was shocked to discover that the masterpiece My Beloved Daughter had disappeared. It turned out that Gentleman Thief had stolen this painting once before. The thief secretly submitted it to an international art exhibition. The painting ultimately won the grand prize. After it became a sensation in the international art world, the public learned for the first time that Gozo, who had remained unmarried his entire life, had a long-lost daughter. Left with no other choice, Gozo was forced to acknowledge Sakura as his illegitimate daughter. Sensing that something was wrong, Hajime immediately rushed to Sakura's room. The moment he opened the door, he found the room in complete disarray. Sakura's long hair had been deliberately cut off, and she had fallen unconscious. A calling card from Gentleman Thief had been left at the scene. It claimed that the long-haired girl in the painting no longer existed. Everyone became convinced that the Gentleman Thief not only stole the painting, but also intended to harm the person depicted in it. Only Hajime immediately spotted the flaw after examining the evidence at the scene. Every shard of broken glass from the bedroom window had fallen inside the room. At first glance, it looked as though someone had broken in through the window, but the broken section was located in the center of the glass. Under normal circumstances, an intruder trying to enter through the window would break the pane closest to the window lock. There would be no reason to smash the center instead. From this single detail, Hajime immediately reached his conclusion. The attacker had never entered from outside. The culprit had been hiding inside the bedroom before the attack even began. After assaulting Sakura, the culprit leaned halfway out the window. The culprit deliberately smashed the center pane to create the illusion of an outside intruder. After regaining consciousness, Sakura provided a crucial testimony. She said that her attacker was a tall man. Her description convinced everyone even further that the legendary Gentleman Thief had to be a man. As night fell, Hajime accidentally discovered a nude portrait. The woman in the painting was Gozo's personal doctor, Kaizu. Gozo and Kaizu clearly shared an intimate relationship. At that very moment, they were secretly plotting to kill Sakura. Just as Kaizu was about to poison Sakura, someone suddenly appeared behind her. Later, Kaizu's body was discovered in the estate's pond. The nude portrait had also vanished without a trace. Inspector Isamu concluded that this was the Gentleman Thief's method of operation, and that it was becoming increasingly brutal. Hajime decided to investigate everyone's motive first. The suspect Haruhiko had just been forced to pay his girlfriend an enormous breakup settlement. The alcoholic painter Kenjiro was drowning in debt. The reporter Maki had a mysterious background. The art dealer Seiji would stop at nothing to obtain valuable paintings. The butler Kamiyama had wandered from place to place for years before Gozo hired him only a year earlier. It could be said that everyone had a motive. During a casual conversation, Sakura also revealed that her adoptive father, who disappeared 5 years earlier, had been a talented painter whose work never sold. He was nothing like her famous biological father. After hearing this, the painter Kenjiro could no longer stay silent. He revealed that 15 years earlier, Gozo had stolen his artistic ideas and used them to become famous in the art world. Kenjiro had always believed Gozo was nothing more than a mediocre painter, but 5 years ago, Gozo's artistic style suddenly changed completely. In his drunken state, Kenjiro insisted that someone far more talented had been painting on Gozo's behalf. Late that night, Gozo suddenly realized that Kaizu's death might be connected to someone who had supposedly died years ago. He decided to make a phone call to confirm his suspicion, but the moment he picked up the phone, someone struck him from behind and knocked him to the floor. The following morning, Kamiyama received a phone call from Gozo. After learning that something had happened, he immediately handed the phone to Hajime, who happened to be passing by. On the other end of the line, Gozo desperately cried out for help, but after only a few screams, he was murdered. Everyone immediately drove to Lavender Villa. Sakura trembled with fear during the drive. Before long, they discovered Gozo's body near the river. His self-portrait had been stolen as well. The studio was filled with signs of a violent struggle. Just then, Hajime caught Haruhiko attempting to steal another painting. This time, Haruhiko intended to replace the original with a forgery. From this, Hajime finally discovered the Gentleman Thief's trick of hiding the genuine paintings behind replicas. He decided to use Haruhiko as bait to lure out the real culprit. That evening during dinner, Haruhiko deliberately announced that he wanted to take 2 replica paintings with him, without giving it much thought. Sakura immediately agreed. Later that night, everyone quietly hid inside the closets to set up an ambush, but Gentleman Thief had already seen through Hajime's plan. To everyone's astonishment, the legendary Gentleman Thief turned out to be the seemingly ordinary magazine reporter Maki. She had used a gender-neutral name for years to deliberately convince everyone that Gentleman Thief was a man. She openly confessed her past. However, she firmly stated that she only stole famous paintings and had never harmed or killed anyone. She also explained that she had not been the one who submitted the famous painting to the international exhibition, nor was she responsible for any of the later assaults or murders. The differences in the handwriting on the calling cards clearly proved that someone had been impersonating her. The only reason she came to the estate was to uncover the true culprit who had been using her name. She also intended to take the famous painting with her. The moment she finished speaking, Maki threw down a smoke bomb and escaped aboard a helicopter. Although Maki successfully escaped, The painting she took was only a replica. Hajime had successfully protected the original. Soon afterward, the local police informed everyone that since Gentleman Thief had already left, everyone would be required to evacuate the following day. Later, Hajime went out for a walk. He happened to run into Sakura. She looked heartbroken because Hajime would be leaving the next day. She gazed at him with hope in her eyes. Her lips trembled as she finally gathered the courage to confess her feelings while they were alone. But Miyuki suddenly appeared once again. Interrupting her confession, Hajime awkwardly claimed that the two of them had simply been stargazing and looking for the Southern Cross. Before he could finish speaking, Haruhiko suddenly appeared and exposed Hajime's lie. As an astronomer, he explained that the Southern Cross could not be seen just anywhere. It was only visible from areas south of Okinawa. The moment Hajime heard that, an idea suddenly flashed through his mind. He immediately remembered that the portrait also contained the pattern of the Southern Cross. At that instant, he realized that the entire case was filled with inconsistencies. Without hesitation, he contacted the reporter Yusuke and asked him to travel overnight to Hadaruma Island, the southernmost island of Okinawa, to investigate the truth. The next morning, Hajime ran into Seiji acting suspiciously in Gozo's study. Seiji handed Hajime a sketchbook that contained a shocking secret. At that moment, Yusuke called from Hadaruma Island. He had uncovered an important lead at the local hospital. The moment Hajime hung up the phone, he had already identified the real person impersonating Gentleman Thief. That afternoon, Sakura couldn't bear to watch Hajime leave and ran back to her room. Meanwhile, Poro quietly climbed into the car. Kamiyama drove everyone to the train station. Just as Kamiyama handed Hajime his luggage, Poro suddenly began barking wildly at him. At that instant, every piece of the puzzle finally fell into place. Hajime completely unraveled the truth behind the entire case and the killer's method. He immediately returned to the estate. He gathered everyone together and revealed the truth behind the murders. From beginning to end, the real Gentleman Thief, Maki, had only done two things. First, she returned the famous painting that Haruhiko had stolen. Second, she took away the portrait of the young girl. Everything that happened afterward, including the murders, had nothing to do with her. Someone had deliberately impersonated Gentleman Thief. The purpose was to frame her for every crime. The culprit intentionally created the terrifying image of Gentleman Thief as both an art thief and a serial killer. But the murderer never expected that the real Gentleman Thief would unexpectedly become involved in the case. That completely disrupted the killer's carefully planned scheme. Hajime then revealed the key evidence that solved the case. Gozo never used public transportation. He also insisted on painting only scenes he had personally witnessed and never painted imaginary landscapes. However, the background of the portrait of his daughter featured the Southern Cross. That constellation can only be seen from Hadaruma Island, south of Okinawa. This alone proved that the painting could not have been created by Gozo himself. Yusuke, after conducting an on-site investigation, learned that a struggling painter had once been hospitalized there. The portrait of the young girl had been painted by him. The person who sent him to the hospital was Kaizu. The truth behind Gozo's dramatic change in artistic style 5 years earlier was finally exposed. For many years, Gozo had secretly hired another painter to create his artwork. That painter eventually refused to remain someone else's ghost artist. Gozo and Kaizu then joined forces against him. They injected him with large amounts of drugs. He lost both his memory and his ability to speak. In the end, he became nothing more than a puppet who could only paint. Afterward, he was abandoned in a remote hospital and left to die. Hajime then took out the sketchbook. Inside were sketches that the painter had drawn of a young Sakura 5 years earlier. Some people wondered whether the struggling painter had returned to take revenge. Hajime immediately rejected that theory. The painter had died 3 months earlier. The only person left who could seek revenge was his daughter. That daughter was Sakura. The truth was that Sakura had already discovered long ago that Gozo was the man who had destroyed her father's life. That was when she began planning her revenge. She secretly submitted the portrait her father had painted of her to the art exhibition under the name of Gentleman Thief. Her goal was to make everyone believe that Gozo had an illegitimate daughter, but Gozo could never admit that he wasn't the one who painted it. He had no choice but to publicly acknowledge that he had a daughter. That allowed Sakura to move into the estate without raising suspicion. Once she was inside, she began carrying out her revenge. Kamiyama immediately argued that it was impossible. When Gozo was murdered, Sakura had traveled to the crime scene together with everyone else. She couldn't possibly have had time to kill him. Hajime explained that the most ingenious part of the entire case was Sakura's alibi. She first attacked Gozo inside the main estate. She blindfolded him. Then she locked him inside the trunk of his private luxury car. She also placed Lavender inside the trunk, using the scent to convince Gozo that he had already been taken to Lavender Villa. She then returned to the main estate. Later, she traveled back to Lavender Villa together with everyone else. After arriving, she pretended to be too frightened to get out of the car, while everyone rushed into the villa to investigate. She quietly dragged Gozo's body out of the trunk and dumped it beside the river. That completed the entire body disposal without anyone noticing, without realizing it. Everyone present had become witnesses to Sakura's perfect alibi. The reason Poirot barked at Hajime's backpack was because it had been placed inside the trunk that carried the scent of lavender. That tiny detail became the final piece of irrefutable evidence. Hajime also pointed out that Sakura had made one fatal mistake. She claimed that the person who attacked her was a tall man, but the real gentleman thief was actually a woman. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Sakura finally stopped pretending and confessed to everything. Her father's name was Nobuhiko. Everything had happened exactly as Hajime had deduced. Nobuhiko was the ghost artist who had painted on Gozo's behalf. Lavender was Nobuhiko's favorite flower. 5 years earlier, Gozo lured Nobuhiko away with promises of fame and success. Instead, he subjected him to endless exploitation. Eventually, Nobuhiko disappeared completely from his family's life. The last time Sakura saw her father was on Hadaruma Island. By then, Nobuhiko had already lost his mind. He couldn't even recognize his own daughter. From that day on, Sakura devoted herself to caring for him every single day. She took off her glasses. She let her hair grow long. She hoped that one day her father would recognize her again. Finally, after completing his last painting, My Beloved Daughter, Nobuhiko recognized Sakura once more, but at that very moment, his life came to an end. Later, Sakura saw the painting displayed in a shop window with Gozo's name signed on it. After investigating further, she discovered that Gozo had exploited her father for years. In the end, he had destroyed her father's life. From that moment on, she swore to take revenge. After finally achieving her revenge, she felt she had nothing left to live for. In the end, she chose to take her own life and died in Hajime's arms. Even in her final moments, she never found the courage to say the words she had kept hidden in her heart. She left this world carrying that final regret. And with that, the case finally came to an end.